rebels and troublemakers to stand out. Marginalized with voices making us so proud. For identity in the industry, we all shout. So many women empowered making their own.
Oh man, Cheryl, it's been a lot these last few months, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. When we started the podcast, the WGA strike had only just begun. And since then, so much more is happening. So Manon, let's recap.
Freedom's still the anthem. She paved and made her own way to Hollywood, yelling and one. System try to charge her for speaking up.
Hey, this is the Women of Color Unite podcast, a bi-weekly podcast about navigating the entertainment industry as a woman of color. I'm Cheryl L. Bedford, founder of the nonprofit organization Women of Color Unite and creator of the JTC list.
And I'm Manon de Reeper, Vice President of Women of Color Unite. And we're so happy that you're joining us for this episode of the Women of Color Unite podcast.
So this is the last episode of this season of the Women of Color Unite podcast.
We started with talking about the WGA strike. That was the first episode. We went over the impact that it was all going to have on women of color specifically. We're on day 101 now. So
yeah, and in the meantime, SAG-AFTRA has also gone on strike. So there's that. Yeah, and then the next episode, we talked about the DEI departments. Everybody knows how I feel about those. Then how studios leave money on the table. Rowana's episode, which, thank you, baby girl, for trusting us as an organization to tell your story. Akosua, she's become one of our ride or dies, along with Sarah, and then colorism. So, what has been the impact so far of the podcast on public, Hollywood, and lastly, us? What you think, Manon?
I think we've seen a lot. We went into some really kind of more controversial, I will say, topics later on. We've seen a lot of feedback, both positive and negative. For me personally, it's been a really great, very enlightening experience, to be honest. It was really wonderful to have these conversations with our guests. Have all been very great to join us, and it was wonderful to get some of the insights from Dr. Lassane and Dr. Webb. I think that was very special. I really enjoyed recording these episodes. Just for the record, I've been in 4 different countries for the 6 episodes that we have recorded. So it's been interesting navigating the logistics of that for me personally. But I think the most important thing for me, is the comments and the feedback that we've had from a lot of our listeners who feel more heard. And I think we saw that especially with Rowana's episode on the sexual battery that she experienced at the hands of, a DEI executive at Sony. That was episode 4, by the way.
Yeah, and his name is Brett King, because we call people that. And then, of course, we're breaking down our meeting with Stacey Green and Paul Martin at Sony. I think that those were really important episodes as far as Black women and women of color being heard, because I think the last statistics that they did on sexual harassment in the workplace, as the statistics have gone down for white women, they've gone up for Black women and other women of color, because perpetrators don't stop. They don't stop. They just pick on those more vulnerable. There's a lot, really, with the implosion of Time's Up and so many people wanting to bury their heads like it never existed. I think that has been one of the hardest things to navigate, right? Time's Up got all of this money and they got all of this play and all of that, and then they just implode. And people don't even mention it anymore. People who sat on the board, people who ran it. It's like it never existed. One of my biggest problems with that is that even if you don't want to admit your mistake, remember that thing we talked about? Always admit what you're wrong, because it's not like people don't know that you're wrong. And this idea of burying your head in the sand. That's when you know they didn't give a damn about Black women and women of color. And I don't care how many Black women or women of color actually sat on the board or anything like that, because history has taught us that there is always a backlash to any civil rights movement, any justice movement. And my question to all of them is, who the fuck did you think was going to be impacted? Like, do you not read? Do you not understand history? Or in essence, did you not give a damn? Did you care more about yourself, your reputation, answering questions than you actually give about Black women and women of color? Because you knew this shit was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. It always happens. We were not an organization that was prepared to take that on, right? Meaning that it wasn't part of our mission because there was somebody else doing it. But being an advocacy group, we were the ones that people came to, and you left us on our own. It does not take a fucking genius to figure out who else were they going to come to? Like, who else were people going to come to in Hollywood? This woeful ignorance, the fact
There's
that
no one like us,
the fact that no one reached out, no one donated, no one offered to help, and left us on our own without any of the resources. And we just had to figure it out on the fly, which we've always had a ways approach of doing things. So, I mean, as far as that goes, that was in our wheelhouse, being able to shift and move and, and figure this shit out. But emotionally, because it has been a lot, I don't know how much forgiveness I got for that. And I'm just being honest, emotionally, what I have been through, what our entire team has been through, what Rowana went through, Tony, Amy, Akosawa, Gregory, everybody who went to every single meeting, everybody holding everybody else's hand. It's not just me. It's my entire team. You know how protective I am of everybody because nobody gets paid. You know how protective I am of our entire fucking membership. And so y'all left us on our own. I got certain feelings about that. Like, y'all, you need to fucking apologize. Like, I have very specific feelings about that. Yeah, y'all left us on our own. And we still did the work. And we still managed to get rid of a predator in 3-4 months? I don't know if I have that kind of forgiveness right now, right? Like, it hasn't even been a year. I don't know how yet to forgive that.
Let's actually touch on that, because something that we hear a lot in terms of the impact of this podcast, but also in terms of the impact of doing this work in general, and that is the concept of giving grace. People tell us that we need to give grace to people, how we need to essentially be more forgiving in a lot of the things that we fight in this industry that we believe in. And I think that is one of those things, is that people always expect us, but especially you, to give grace and to forgive. And I don't think that people quite understand how emotionally taxing the work is that we do, that you do in particular, being the face of this organization. And I think it's actually good to address that, at least once here on this podcast, that people do understand that it is a lot, and that it is truly a lot to bear. Our team does, and we support Cheryl as much as we can in all of what we do and what she does. But I don't think people quite understand the burden of trying to run this organization, especially when we do tend to make people uncomfortable. It's become this weird buzz thing that people say where, oh, we're making our own table, or, we're going to go off on our own whatever have you that they say. But we're actually doing it, and we're actually trying to change things. And that then makes people so comfortable that they tell us to give people more grace because it is the system, because, XYZ reasons.
Ooh. So for those who cannot see, yeah. I didn't expect the podcast to go this way, but it's okay. It's been a lot. I don't want to let our membership down. I don't want to let our advocates down. I don't want to let Rwanda down. And sometimes I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. There is this idea that I'm strong. I'm putting it in quotes. There is this idea that we cannot be vulnerable. Years ago, there was a commercial. And I don't remember what it was about, but it was a Black woman in a commercial. And she said, "Tears don't compromise my strength." I can be vulnerable. I can be strong. I can be angry, because here's the thing. I'm a complete human being with a range of emotions. I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. What I try not to do is I try not to do harm. And when I see people actively harming other people, it pisses me off. It is hard to find forgiveness to those that I know who fucking know better, because they are worried about themselves, right? Or their reputation, or what's it going to do. I'm just going to be honest. I'm never going to forgive Fanchon Cox, ever, for betraying Rwanda, for betraying me, and then trying to gaslight us. There are people in this industry I'm never going to fucking forgive. You can forgive them. Other people can forgive them. I don't necessarily, people say, like you forgive for yourself, to let that go. I can let you go and still never forgive you. Right? Like there are certain people I'm just not going to give grace to. People who actively harm other people because they want to hold on to their reputation. And here's the other thing. I'm always going to draw the line in the sand. And that's what makes people uncomfortable. I'm like, you can't fuck with her and fuck with me. Like that's impossible. Like you are more than welcome to fuck with her. You cannot then come up to me and be like, "Hey, can we roll together?" No. And that's what makes people uncomfortable, because Hollywood has always had this idea of letting people get away with it for the betterment of Hollywood, for the betterment of movements, all of these things. And the people who always get left behind are Black women and other women of color. We are the ones who are always told we got to suck it up for the betterment of ... So here's the thing. And you people will realize the day we record this, I'm always going to have a folding chair with me. I'm always going to have a folding chair with me. Whether it is physically, mentally, I'm always going to have a folding chair with me. Because here's the thing. This is the funny thing. So my parents were separated by the time I was 2 months old, and then later divorced, right? And so my mother, I was an only child, and my mother, in raising this little girl, always said to me, If somebody ever messes with you, pick up the heaviest object. Especially, wait for it, if it is a chair, and swing, baby girl, swing. Guess what? I'm picking up that chair and I'm going to swing. I'm going to swing. Now, swinging is not easy. You don't have to stand with me. Just don't get in my fucking way. Don't get in my way. And actively getting in my way is not admitting the time's up, imploded, right? When I say you don't have to get in my way, that does mean I do expect a donation. I do expect, hey, we're going to help, because getting in my way is acting like that shit never happened. Like you are actively getting in my way. So here's the thing. I'm still going to call people out. And I'm going to pick up that chair. And here's the funniest thing. So then this is how I can go from crying to telling a story, right? So here's the funny thing. When I had my apartment totally redone and got brand new carpeting and everything like that, and Manon knows this because she has stayed with me. Manon, what do I have right outside my door?
You have a folding chair.
I have a black folding chair so people can actually sit down, take off their shoes, and there's a place for them to put their shoes when they enter. I have a black folding chair outside of my house. Directly. Let that be a warning.
Yep.
Let that be a warning. So yeah, I can get real emotional and I can cry because this job is fucking hard. It is hard. And almost basically for the last year, everybody has left us on our own. I'm going to remember that shit.
Yeah, they have.
I'm not going to pretend I'm not going to remember that shit because I want everybody to hear me. I am a middle-class Black girl from Baltimore. I am from Baltimore. So I have gone to private school my entire life. So I'm bougie with a bit of street and a dash of ratchet. Hear me. I'm always going to have a folding chair. I'm going to draw that line in that sand. I am going to make people choose. Are you going to be on the right side of history? You're going to be on the wrong side of history. Because you have heard Dr. Akosua saying, you have heard Dr. Cheryl L. You've heard our attorney. You've heard Rwana. You have heard our publicist. You have heard these people. Here's the thing about me. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, and I'm smart enough to surround myself with people who know more than I do. You have heard them.
Yep.
Don't play in my face. Don't play in my face. Don't tell me, oh, well, we need to suck it up. No, we don't. We don't need to suck it up. For the betterment of whom? Running Women of Color Unite, overseeing the JTC list, running Start with 8 with You, helping people write white papers, taking on, trigger warning, sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual battery, all of that. It's fucking hard.
It's hard. It's exhausting. It's a lot.
But more than anything else, it is gratifying. One of our members told me last night, she said, thank you. Thank you for your advocacy. We say the quiet parts out loud. That's all.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. We just say the quiet parts out loud. We call out people who have been harmful to our organization. The fact is, a lot of people experience this, especially from marginalized communities. And I hope this gives the strength to other organizations to continue to do the same thing. I hope this gives strength to those who feel like they don't have a voice to use it, right? To understand that they do have a voice. And I want people to understand that we may not get in the donations, but everybody volunteers. That, and I really think the reason so many people are willing to volunteer is because we aren't afraid. That's not actually true. There are some decisions I make and I'm like, this shit's scary. We just do it anyway. How is this going to affect my career as a producer? I don't know. I'm just going to do it anyway. May I not get a job? But I'm just going to do it anyway. And I hope that,
because it's the right thing.
Yes. And, you know, and a couple of people there have been a couple of people with much larger platforms and followings than I have on social media who've said this. But I tweeted out about this idea that we're not our ancestors. Yes, we are. Right? Like, stop believing history books, because for every day of slavery, there was a rebellion, right? For every day of slavery is a day we actually fought back somewhere. And so I am my ancestors. And I said and I say this often, that when I talk about letting my membership down, letting Rohanna down, letting you down, letting anyone, all of our volunteers, everyone who helps us in any way, shape, or form down, what it really boils down to is I don't want to let the ancestors down. It's really what it boils down to, because the ancestors live in all of us. And I don't want to let them down. And people would say, that is a lot of pressure to put on yourself. Yeah. Well, here's the funniest thing. In kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher told my mother, don't put any pressure on Cheryl. She puts enough on herself. I was 5. Next month, I'm going to be 57. Like, I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I know this, right? Like, I know I put a lot of pressure on myself. But I feel it. I feel the ancestors. I feel them. I just feel them. So, yes, that's the tears, the weight of the world on my shoulders. You know, I've been like this since I was 5.
Yeah. Yeah. For a fact, I don't think I know anyone who puts quite so much pressure on themselves as you do. Sometimes it's too much, but it is a lot. I truly think that there is no one in Hollywood or entertainment industry as a whole, honestly, that's doing what we're doing. And yeah, you said the bit where we say the stuff that's spoken softly, we say it out loud. And I think that's part of where the discomfort comes from, because of the respectability politics that we have seen quite a bit of in the responses to our episodes as well. And do we want to read some of the comments that we've been getting?
Okay, wait, I'm stealing myself for those comments. Wiping my nose, wiping my tears. Okay.
The episode with Dr. Webb on colorism hit some sensitive spots here and there for some people. Also, on the flip side, some very positive comments. But let's start off with one of the more negative ones, the ones that we're seeing a lot of. Morgan Freeman said, "Stop calling me black and I'll stop calling you white. That's how you get rid of racism. Now you're reading this colorism word into it to confuse people more." That was one of the comments that we got on YouTube, and it's a type of comment that we're seeing a lot of.
They're accusing us of dividing Black people. Let me just be perfectly clear. The world already does that. Like, the world has always done that. Black people have done that because white supremacy, right? Like that's why we have things like the brown paper bag test, the blue vein society, which was, people light enough that you could see their veins through their skin, like all of these types of things. Here's what I would say, because these comments tend to come on clips. Listen to the entire episode. That's what I would tell people so that they can understand. Here's the other thing. Just because you feel something does not make it true, right? The reason that I talked to Dr. Cheryl L. Dr. Akosua saying, is because these are people, this is their field of study. And just FYI, recently Harvard quoted Sarah. Harvard. I believe it was Harvard
That's right.
Medical Review. Harvard quoted her. So you don't know more?
Yeah.
You don't know more than the people who study it. And so that's what I would tell people. The other thing I would say is that change only happens in the uncomfortable.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So for all those people who are uncomfortable with that conversation that Sarah and I had, because Manon was very quiet through it, I would say, okay, you need to do the work to find out why you were so uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Is it because the people within the media, because let's face it, content is king and queen. And so if your ideas come from the fact that you're constantly seeing light-skinned people as heroines, as the damsel in distress, and then it's dark-skinned people who are always the villain, then y'all need to check that, right? Like that's what I would say. Y'all need to check that. And it's not like colorism hasn't always been part of the problem.
No.
Right? Like it's always been part of the problem. What I do find really interesting is the fact that we're the only group in Hollywood who talks about it on a consistent basis. Here's the other thing that I would say. Check out the Gina Davis Institute, because they have a lot of very interesting studies regarding colorism. Right. So it's not like this doesn't happen. You can track it statistically.
Yeah, 100%. And what I would like to add to that as well is I think it's one of those subjects that white folks tend to avoid because they don't know about it or don't understand it, and Black folks get too uncomfortable, and so people tend to steer away from it. It's not a popular subject, that's for sure, but it's one that needs to be talked about. And I would like to also say, because yes, during the main episode, I was silent for most of it because I felt it was important for me to be a little bit more on the background for that one, to let you and Sarah speak. But for all of those people who want to hear my perspective, we actually did have a hot tea. So the premium segment where I speak about how to leverage your light privilege and how to deal with some of this stuff, right? So if you're feeling uncomfortable, listen to that one too. There's so much work, I think, still to be done. But for the more positive comments that we're getting, so I'm going to read one of the many that we got, and we got a lot in private as well. So again, this was on YouTube as well. Someone said, "We are dark-skinned, beautiful Black women. That is why they talk about us all the time, living rent-free in their heads. It must be exhausting for them. Good." We're getting a lot of comments like that as well. And I think that shows how important it is that we're actually acknowledging that this is happening, because it feels a little bit like gaslighting in a lot of ways, because it makes it feel to, I think, dark-skinned people and women in particular, that this is not real, that this is something that's imagined, and that they're crazy for even suggesting this or being harmful even, right, for wanting to discuss this subject. And I think that it's really important that we continue this conversation, that we continue to make people uncomfortable, because only that way, I think that's how we got to this point in the racism discussion is, more and more people are now used to having that conversation. A lot of people still are really uncomfortable about talking with it, but it's at that level where at least it's not as uncommon, right?
Everything that you just said. And the fact is, it makes people uncomfortable when we center dark-skinned people in the conversation.
Right.
Like that it's like the fact of how you make white people uncomfortable by decentering them, right? And so, but I will push back on one thing. White people know what they're doing.
Okay.
You can't tell me that they look around at everybody and realize, wait, everybody is either light skinned or biracial.
Sure, it's convenient.
Like you can't tell me that they don't do.
I agree.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's like that. It's like when Sarah and I were talking about the conversation I had with Nithya Rahman, right? And when they were like, oh, the rest of you aren't good enough. But if you're looking at it and you're like, but wait, so all the people who are quote unquote good enough are all white? Like statistically not possible, right? Like it's just not statistically possible. And here's the other thing I want people to do. So we at Women of Color Unite, when we talk about all of these things, when we look at the statistics, we also look at studies from the National Institute of Health. And there is a study from the National Institute of Health that says that dark-skinned women suffer from depression 30% more than light-skinned or brown-skinned women. There is a direct correlation. They also go on to say there's a direct correlation between that and how dark-skinned women are perceived in media. So there is this idea that you cannot self-confident your way out of that, right? There's this idea that you just need more self-confidence. Look, the fact is I am as confident as you can be, right? Gone to private school all my life, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from NYU Film School and Master of Fine Arts degree from the American Film Institute, right? And yet, this idea that I'm not good enough, oh, please. So I can't self-confident my way out of systemic and systematic colorism. It's when we talk about the trauma of slavery being passed down in your DNA, when we talk about these things, the idea that you can self-confident your way, that's not how it works. It's just not how it works. So we're going to continue to talk about it. We're going to continue to center the most marginalized, like when we have our discussion on colorism, how we always make sure we have somebody from the LGBTQ community and somebody from the disabled community, because that takes on something even more. Mm-hmm. Right? Now you're taking on somebody who is actually more marginalized than you are, which is why we always make sure that we have all intersectionalities when we talk about colorism.
Right.
So, that. And look, people are just going to get up on their fields. Like
always.
I'm just going to use a saying from the Black community. It sounds like a personal problem
to me. That's it. That's a good way to...
I told you I was bougie with a bit of street. I told you I was bougie with a bit of street and a dash of ratchet. Right? That sounds like a personal problem to me.
It's a good way to wrap up that part of the podcast, because I think you're right. That's it. And what I also just wanted to say in all of this, as also we're wrapping up this first season of the WOCU podcast, is I wanted to give Nwabata, Nnani and Lauren Bonett such a massive, massive props for the work that they've been doing on this podcast. And they've been running all of the behind the scenes. They've been putting in so much time and so much work. And again, we're completely self-run, non-funded. So maybe consider putting in a donation at wokunite.org/donate, or subscribe to this podcast. It's they've been doing amazing work. Let me just say that.
I want to thank them as well. And I want to thank you, Manon. So when Manon said, we're going to do this, I was like, okay, because people have been asking me for years to do it, right? And I'm like, okay, but I don't want to do anything except show up.
Yes, you did.
Manon and Nwabata always, they're the ones who write everything out, do the intro, like script it as far as like what we're going to talk about, the outline. Like I don't have to do anything except show up and follow along. I'm gonna start crying again. It's just one of those days. I think it's because it's our last one before we take a break. And I am just so thankful for all of you. But I'm thankful for everybody who volunteers at Women of Color Unite. I could not do this without our entire team. So yes, thank you all. The conversations that we have, like off camera, off mic. I consider Nwabata and Lauren friends now. That's been the best part.
Yes.
It's been the best part of this journey. All the friends, new friends that I have made. As angry as I am about the larger community of Hollywood that has left us on our own, I really know I am not alone. There are people who believe in the mission. But more than anything, there are people who believe in me. And I love you for it. And I could not do this without you. Thank you.
Oh, Cheryl.
From the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. I wish I could give you a big hug. It's 100%. I think no one can see this, but we're all crying. And kind of like being sappy and sobby, but it's true. It's I don't think people realize how tight of a group we are, and no matter how much maybe people try to get, not necessarily even get between us, but have opinions about how we do things or whatever, it's like, there's no way. This is so amazing, and also you're welcome. Because
I always tell people, you tried building a community. Like you try it without charging people fees, without all of the gatekeeping and the trauma essays. You try it.
Yeah, you try it.
Right? Like you try it, and keeping 5,000 people on our app, and over 5,000 people engaged, almost 6,000 members. Like you try it.
Yeah.
I just want to say, but I could not do this without the engagement of the members. And I think what people need to understand is we are more than just a nonprofit. We are a whole ass community.
And a movement. Yeah.
What did Teresa Giacino originally write in that Mary Sue article? It was a moment that became a movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That. And one of the reasons I really pushed for this podcast, and one of the reasons why, like, we script stuff, like little bits though, but you bring the brilliance though, because let's just be clear, like the vast majority of this podcast is not scripted. And that is all Cheryl. And for me, that was the most important thing, and why I pushed it so hard is that I wanted to give you a platform where people can hear you speak and can hear your passion, your humanity, your vulnerability, your humanness, right? And what we're doing, and hear it from you rather, through some sort of grapevine. Or there's a lot of talking in Hollywood, and I wanted to make sure that people hear it from you. Right? Because you speak these things on a daily basis, and I have been working with you for 4 years soon, and I have been on probably a 1,000 meetings with you at this point, and I've heard you say all of these things before, and I felt like people need to hear this. So that's why, and I still think it's important. And do we even still want to talk about the SAG strike?
We should.
Yeah.
We should absolutely talk about the SAG strike. But the vulnerability, because it is difficult. It's rewarding. Look, here it is more rewarding than it is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because it's hella rewarding.
Right.
When I am walking down the streets of Los Angeles and members stop me on the street, at the gym, in the grocery store, all of these things have happened.
Right.
To say thank you, to say that they got a job, they got the WGA card, they got whatever it was that they got. It's what keeps me going. The fact that we are actually affecting lives and making people's lives better.
Yeah.
Because that's what the ancestors wanted, right? As my mother said, you have one job as a human being on this planet. That's to make the world a better place for the next generation. And by doing that, you make it a better place now. And I have always taken that to heart. And it's the reason why, we're able to affect change, to help people. So I'm very, very proud of that. It's just sometimes, like life, like it just gets to you and it gets hard, and you get you're looking for a whole lot of yeses and you get a whole lot of no's. And what I say to you other day, I just want to win. I just want one little win.
One win.
Yeah. But even with that, it's not going to stop us. And I think that that's really what people have to understand, is that I can sit here and cry today and get up and fight tomorrow. Hell, if need be, and I got an email, I'd be fighting, I'd be crying and fighting at the same time, right? Like, so I just take that very seriously. And again, I am really, really thankful for our members, for our team across the board, for every advocate, for my board of directors, for our podcast team. If you go and look at our website, it looks like we are a multi-million-dollar organization for everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And we got that much in the bank.
Yeah, it's wild.
So that really is just the strength of all of our volunteers and staff and all of that. But with that, drying these tears again. Okay, let's talk about the strike. Woo, child.
Geez, yeah, because when we started this recording, like this podcast, it was just a WGA strike. And since then, the SAG has joined them. How are we feeling about all of this?
I have said this before. I will say this again. Capitalism, racism go hand in hand. You can see this shit coming. Mm-hmm. Anybody is paying attention to history. But it's not just that. It's the people are striking, in the hotel workers and service workers who are striking right now. There are strikes going on in California. They're going to strikes across this country. And that's because the pay gap between the 1% and everybody else has gotten bigger and bigger. Oh yeah, did you see the newest study, the newest article? Reaganomics has not worked. The trickle down system.
Yes.
Somebody put, and water is wet.
Yeah, big surprise.
So as we have given tax cuts and corporate welfare, and so it's just gotten the disparity has gotten bigger and bigger, and people are tired of it.
Yep.
And people are tired of it. People aren't going to take it anymore. People are losing their health care. People can't get health care anymore. If you look at the amount of money that actors are making and the fact that they're not getting residuals. And I said before, capitalism just wants you to work until you drop dead.
Yep.
And then because of the lack of health care, we consider people with disabilities disposable in this country. And anybody who doesn't follow Crutches and Spice, she's one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter and on Instagram to talk about those with disabilities. But she's been talking about really since COVID, the idea that people with disabilities are disposable, right? Because people don't want to wear a mask. Well, those who are most vulnerable, you don't want to wear a mask around them? And I think we need to remember your rights end where someone else's begin. So your right not to wear a mask end where somebody else who wants to stay alive. What the fuck? Yeah, I just wanted to say that and give her a shout out because I think she's amazing. I'm very good at listening to people know more than I do. But yeah, so now we have writers and actors on strike. In the state of California, we got service workers on strike. And I'm not crossing the picket line.
I think also what's been so interesting in the past couple of weeks since that SAG started their strike is that in relation to the corporate greed, the capitalism, is how blatant it has been. There's no shame apparently for them and I'm specifically talking about the AMPTP, the CEOs, some of the comments that have been coming out of their crew, their team, have just been absolutely just insane. And so I wanted to also quickly refer to the comments specifically about them wanting to basically starve people into giving up on this strike. And now we're already seeing in the news that effectively that's what's happening. And it is going to happen because it's going to take a long time, this strike, probably. And so Billy Porter has told people in the news that he's already had to sell his house. A Black gay actor, which I think is worth mentioning because those are usually the first, I think, to be impacted at a level quite like this. And that's probably going to be what we're going to be seeing, is that there's going to be such a huge impact on people. And I think the thing that we as consumers of the media now, not considering that we're also makers of the media, but just as consumers, people are so good at crafting an image of wealth, specifically actors. If you portray wealth, people will believe that you're successful and actually wealthy. Whereas now we're realizing that for a lot of these people, they are still living paycheck to paycheck, which is something that Billy Porter, I think specifically, he looks very glamorous, right, in all of his public stuff. And so I think it's this is just a harbinger, if you will, of what we're going to see, is that people are going to be very, very severely impacted by this. And if we're contrasting that to what's coming out of the AMPTP and how ruthless, honestly, they've been, it's we're not in a good place when it comes to how humans are treating humans.
So, first of all, who's their publicity firm? Because they're fucking this shit up.
Whew. Oh my God.
Okay, so do I think they care about their workers? No, not at all. Do I think they care about their image? Yes.
Right.
And I don't think that they realize how disconnected they actually are.
Right. That's probably it.
I think that they say shit and they're like, what do you mean people didn't take it well? I also think that thing with where we're talking about, like capitalism and racism, yeah, the people are going to be the most affected are going to be marginalized people. We haven't been in it that long. Right? Yep. So again, lack of generational wealth, pay disparity, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that they actually care about that? No. Do I think they care about their image? Absolutely. Because the only thing that works, right? Part of white supremacy is, you want to be like me, right? This idea of telling cis, straight, white men, you can be like me. And then there's such a disconnect that even they're like, no, I can't.
Yeah, we don't want to be like that.
I don't know what. I think that this idea of starving people, making them homeless, all of that, but isn't that capitalism?
Yeah.
Isn't that just capitalism? I think the other thing that they don't realize is that because of their policy over the last few years, there are a lot of people in the industry who already have second jobs.
Right.
So you're saying you're going to starve and make homeless. These people already have second jobs and third jobs and fourth jobs. Like shit, you ain't never have to do.
Right. Exactly.
Right? I don't think that they understand because of their power. Remember, we don't say white privilege because we're really talking about the power of whiteness, right? What they don't understand is how the rest of us have to scrap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We scrappy because we have had to survive in an industry, especially marginalized people who never gave a damn about us, who still want to act like we in the room, whose DEI people are letting, Brett King get away with shit and dismissing Rwanda. When you take everything that we've talked about and the fact that marginalized people have survived this industry, in some ways thrived in this industry, not to the point of multimillionaire, but have done that. But you're going to tweet out some really ridiculous shit. Don't you know the system that you work in has been set up to dismiss us and to harm us, and yet we have still thrived in that? Motherfucker, sit down.
Yeah.
Have all the seats in the world. And this is what it should drive home to people. These people are no smarter than you are. Remember I said very early on, when I walk into a room, I never walk into a room like I'm there on a humble. I don't care who in the C-suite I'm talking to, because I understand that the reason you're on that side of the table and I'm on this one has nothing to do with smarts or talent. It doesn't. It normally doesn't. I can run circles around these people, right? Yep. These are not bright people all the time. We're not talking about the brightest and the best of us. We're talking about people who normally come from money, have some sort of privilege. Daddy gave him money to start off with. People are like, oh yeah, I didn't get anything. Well, my parents invested $1 million. Motherfucker, sit the fuck down. Shit.
Yep.
So that's the other thing, is to understand they're not, even if they are good at business, doesn't mean that they're bright at everything else. Because some of the stuff that they said, you're right. You're like, I would have never said that shit. I would have never said it. And the idea of not being able to keep your mouth shut. Sometimes maybe you should just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, that's right.
They're just going to say whatever they're going to say, and people are just going to agree with them. And let us not forget that the majority of Americans are on the side of the union workers.
Right.
That's a new study that just came out. So obviously, whatever you're saying isn't necessarily resonating. So we, Women of Color Unite, as we can afford it, we'll still be out there. We'll still, drop off goodies, do what we do. Hopefully we'll have some events coming up. So we have canceled our gala because I'm not putting actors and writers in the same room with executives. I'm not asking people who right now, as like Billy Porter, are losing their house, are getting grants to survive. I'm not asking them to donate to Women of Color Unite because our gala is usually our fundraiser. I know Londi Maduro and Women of Color filmmakers have done the same. They canceled their gala. But what we are hoping to do is to have a bunch of smaller events, just celebrating. Also, I'm a Black woman, so I want to feed you and I want to give you free mimosas. Celebrating women of color with disabilities, BIPOC youth, having something with the aunties, like, what we do best, which is celebrating those most marginalized, talking about the issues that affect people all the time, having a good time, eating some good food, and drinking some mimosas. So that's what we hope to do for the rest of the year. But we'll have more information coming up after we take our break and we come back in the fall. We'll be talking more about our events. We should even have a schedule by then of what we're going to do to close out the last quarter of the year. And thank you again, Manon. Manon, I love you.
Oh, I love you too. This was a special last episode, I think. So
we will continue chatting in our hot tea segment, which is available for our premium subscribers. Manon and I will be chatting about the current events like Megan Thee Stallion. Let's talk about her. And of course, the Montgomery Brawl, because I'm always going to have a folding chair.
So yeah, if you want to join us for that and get access to the video versions of these podcasts so you can see our beautiful faces, our premium subscription is just $2.99 a month, and you can subscribe on Spotify, and you can find the link in the show notes. Either way, that's it for this episode.
Yeah, and I don't know about beautiful faces because there was a little bit of ugly crying, but you can see me ugly cry. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, to all of our episodes. We are very, very thankful for our audience. We will see you in the next episode coming in the fall. See you then. Bye.
Bye. As a premium subscriber, you get access to our Hot Tea Premium segment, as well as the video version of this podcast. You can find the Spotify subscription link in the show notes. And if you're listening through the Spotify app, be sure to cast your vote on the poll and leave a comment or question in the Q&A. The Women of Color Unite podcast is produced by Nwabata Nnani and edited by Lauren Bonett. The music is by Oh Yeah, featuring Nayuta. Subscribe to the Women of Color Unite podcast to never miss an episode. If you want to submit questions or responses to this episode, either written or a voice note, you can send them to podcast@woceunite.com. Find the show notes and transcripts for this podcast on our website, woceunite.org, where you can also learn more about Women of Color Unite and sign up to become a member for free if you haven't yet, or sign up for our monthly newsletter. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation. Donations are what enable us to create amazing programs like our #StartWith8 career development program. If you're on social media, you can follow the podcast at WOCU Podcast, and you can follow Women of Color Unite at WOCUnite.org. Follow Manon, myself, at Manon de Reeper, and Cheryl at Cheryl_CLBP.
Please stay tuned and join us for the next episode of the Women of Color Unite podcast, because we telling it like it is.
We need rebels and troublemakers to stand out, marginalized with voices making us so proud for identity in the industry. We all shout, so many women empowered making their own route.
Like ageism, racism, sexism.
Uncovered, they get together to form a force to prove the one that ain't gotta have a child to be seen as a mother. I'm saying,
All power
to the women of color. Yeah. It's just a salute to Cheryl Bedford, leading activist in the community. She's bridging the gap and bringing all women together to fight for real inclusion amongst all the diversities. Keep going.